All right. This lecture, this class, this session is lecture 15, and we're going to be looking at the trial and the crucifixion of Jesus. Now, the all four gospels deal with this aspect of Jesus's life. It is found recorded for us in Matthew 26, verses 1 to 5, and then from verses 14 to 46, Mark chapter 1, Mark chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, and then picking up again from verses 10 to 42. It's recorded in Luke chapter 22, verses 1 to 46. And of course, John writes about it in chapter 13, verses 1 to 20. And so we're going to spend some time looking at just the trial and the crucifixion. Now, the events that will lead to the crucifixion of Jesus begins actually with the schemes of the Sanhedrin. Now, because if we take a step back and look at what is happening, what we see is that they became jealous. They became jealous of Jesus's popularity. They could not logically deal with his teachings. Um, his followers were again making advances. Uh, were told in one of their accounts that even though Jesus did not physically baptize, that he was baptizing more people than John. So all of this undermined the authority, the popularity, the presence and prominence of the Sanhedrin. And so from the very beginning and from the very outset, um, when they're asking about what manner of man is this, when they're asking, is that this the Joseph the carpenter's son? Who gave you this authority? By what authority do you do these things? All of that um, would climax into a scheme that would ultimately lead to Jesus's death. Now, let's see if we can do. Well, as I said, we would not always read verse going straight down, but we will flip our readings through the different accounts. Let's start with Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26, verses 1 to 5, so that at least we can
Okay.
pick up
One to five.
from some. Matthew 26, verses 1 to 5.
When Jesus had finished all these words, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people will gather together in the court of the high priest named Caiaphas, and they plotted together to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they were saying, "Not during the festival, otherwise a riot might occur among the people."
Okay, if you look at these, the meeting place for this scheme of this plotting of this scheme is in actually Caiaphas's house. Now remember, what do we know about Caiaphas? Caiaphas was the chief priest that was ruling at the time of
Mhm.
during this time. But importantly, he was appointed by the Roman government. So he's not the religious aspect of his becoming high priest. It is the Roman, not that he wasn't a priest, but it is a Roman government that appointed him. So here are some things that we see just in this short account. Um, you know, Jesus says to his disciples that you know that the you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming.
Mhm.
You know that in the next 2 days we are going to have the Passover, and I am going to be crucified. So he is now telling his disciples what is going to happen to him. But
Mhm.
here is something: the chief priests and the elders were meeting secretly in Caiaphas's house. The fact that they're meeting secretly in Caiaphas's house speaks to their sinister intent. All right. And what are they doing in Caiaphas's house? They are plotting to kill Jesus. That's
Mhm.
what they are planning to do. Now, not just that. Um, what they have to do, they're now engineering a plot, because here's what they're saying: we can't kill him during the Passover because there's going to be a riot. So
Mhm.
they are really setting and planning in a very underhand way to actually get rid of Jesus.
Mhm.
All right. Now, the Sanhedrin, some council members within that um, council would have been partial to Jesus. They would have been fair enough to say the discussion and think, no, you can't do that. This is not right. And those people would include Nicodemus,
Mhm.
the same Nicodemus who came to him by night and
Mhm.
acknowledged that, look here, you must be the Son of God because nobody can do miracles like these. Another member of the Sanhedrin that would have been loyal to Jesus, not that he was going to be unjust, but he was going to try to be fair to Jesus, was Joseph of Arimathea. They um, were members of the Sanhedrin. And so they would have been loyal to Jesus, more so loyal to Jesus. They would be expressing loyalty to what is right. They would not be a part of this. Remember, like for instance, Joseph of Arimathea is the person who's going to give him. I think is he the one that was carrying the cross, or he's the one that says you can have my grave for burial?
He's the one that does the grave.
Yeah, he's the one who
Right.
um says, okay, you can be buried in my tomb. I've never I've not used it.
Mhm.
All right, okay. So, but here is the point: because they are plotting evil, because they are doing something devious and underhand, both Nicodemus and Arimathea might not have been at that meeting
Right.
because, right, they
Mhm.
they possibly would not have invited them, because remember, they are meeting at Caiaphas's house.
It's not a public meeting.
It's not a public meeting.
It's private.
It's a private meeting. All right. So this is where they now start to plot what they're going to do with Jesus. Okay. Now, Caiaphas, we there's something about Caiaphas that we need to look at. Caiaphas had presided over a previous meeting that had decided to kill Jesus. This is not the first time he is doing this. So what it shows that Caiaphas was the ringleader in
Hmm.
terms of trying to get rid of Jesus. Now, John uh, is going to tell us about that incident. Look at John chapter 11.
Hmm.
John chapter 11, and we're going to look at verses 47 to 53.
Hmm.
And watch Caiaphas now. All right? All right.
Therefore, the chief priests and the
Many, go on, go on.
Pharisees convened a council and were saying, "What are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him. The Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you take in account that this is expedient for you, that one man died for the people, and that the whole nation might not perish." Now he did not say this on his own initiative, but being a high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. You want me to keep reading?
Yes, man, up to
And, and
53.
not for and not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they planned together to kill him. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that
All right. No, yeah. All
yeah
right.
that
There's
John
something,
puts it
yeah.
John puts it
Say it
chronologically.
again.
John puts it chronologically, and he's also showing that the intervening of God. God, just like God used Pharaoh's when his
Hmm.
heart was hardened, God used Caiaphas' heart to continue to conduct the crucifixion and the sacrifice of Jesus.
All right. Here, here are some things. Okay. Peter would say, and that's why you pointed I just made. Peter would say, "You have taken with wicked hands and crucified," right? In his sermon in Acts 2. I
Hmm.
want us to look at some things here in John's account because this account does not appear elsewhere.
Right.
All right. Now notice what it is. They where is this? This is right after resurrection. They are plotting against Jesus.
Hmm.
They could not explain away Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus was dead for 3 days.
Hmm.
Everybody knew that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Um, and what they were saying is we have to get rid of this man. You know why? Couple of reasons. First of all, um, he is because of his popularity, but their motive, their intention is their own self-interest. If we don't get rid of him, okay, so look at verse 47. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man is performing many signs. Now, if we permit him to continue, we are going to lose not only our popularity, but we are going to lose one, our authority. We cannot afford to do that. That's one. Two, they consider themselves to be the vanguard, to be the preservers of the Jewish nation. Now, if he continues to perform these signs, everybody's going to believe in him.
Mm-hmm.
And what is going to happen? The Romans will take away and take away our nation from us. So what they're doing here now is appealing to nationalistic sentiments. But what they seem to forget, weren't you in captivity a couple years ago? You forget the 70 years Babylonian captivity. You forget all of that. So it is not a strange thing that you lose your nation. You were um in exile.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. So in other words, they're put it this way, they're so evil that there are things that they're forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the point now. It Here's their argument. It is better for one man to die for the nation than the nation to suffer for one man. But this doesn't apply here.
No.
This doesn't apply here, because what is Jesus doing? Nothing. So and the idea is, okay, if you come down to verse 53, so from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. So you see all the questions that they were asking him, all okay, who gave you this authority? Who did all of the questions that they were asking him about when this man dies, whose wife is he going to be in the resurrection? All of those questions that they are asking was the idea of trying to trap him.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus could read through their insincerity and then show them how inconsistent they are in their arguments, how insincere they are, and that really it's like adding gasoline to fire, because they couldn't deal with the logic of Jesus. They can't deal with the popularity of Jesus. They can't deal with the miracles of Jesus. And all of that, they said, okay, the only way that we can stop this man is to kill him. All right? No. So here is it now. Luke is going to tell us something about their insincere plot and motive. Look at Luke 22. Luke 22.
Verse um
Verse 2.
the chief
In
priests.
fact, verses
the
1 and
chief-
2.
Okay,
Yeah, verses 1 and 2.
now the feast of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. The chief priests and the scribes were seeking how they might put him to death, for they were afraid of the people.
All
And
right.
said, okay, mhm.
Okay. But we're going to look at Judas afterwards, right?
Yeah, no, but you got to deal with this one. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Right. So you see, here's what is happening. Um, they were afraid of putting Jesus, they were afraid of unveiling them their motives. They couldn't do it in the light of day. They couldn't do it in the daytime because they would cause too much publicity.
Hmm.
You see, and what it shows how devious they are. Luke is telling us here they were afraid of the daylight. They didn't want the daylight publicity. All right. Now, not only that, they didn't know where to find him. And what I'm trying to show here is how scheming they are. Now, look at, let's look at what Matthew says about this whole thing. Look at Matthew chapter 26. All right. Matthew 26 and the verse, no, verse 14 and 16.
14 and 16.
Mm. 14 through 16 of 26.
All right. Um, then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?" And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then
All
on,
right.
he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus.
No. All right. Um, is this 14? Why do I have 14, 10 to 11? 1 minute. Look at, I might have, why do I have chapter 10, 14? Should be this far into, okay, Matthew 14, 10 to 11. Um, uh, no. Um, this might be Mark 14. Look at Mark 14,
Yeah,
10
that
to
makes
11. And I'm going to, yeah,
I see
Mark
that.
14, 10 to 11.
Mark makes sense.
Yeah,
10 to
it's
11.
Mark 14. Mm-hmm.
Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went off to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. They were glad when they heard this and promised to give him money. And he began seeking how to betray him
Mm-hmm.
at an opportune time.
Okay. All right. Look how Luke puts it. Um, in chapter 22, verse 3 to 6. Luke 22.
Verse 3 to 6. And
Yeah.
Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. And he went away and discussed with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. They had they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began seeking a good opportunity to betray him to them apart from the crowd.
All right. Now here's what happened. They needed to find somebody that was close to him that could find and know where he was. The person who was, well, not the ideal person, but when um, Judas came to them and said, "Look here, how much money are you going to give? Would you be prepared to pay me if I can find him for you? If I can turn him over to you?"
Mm-hmm.
No, you notice their reaction? It
They were
says
happy.
that they were glad. They
Yeah.
were happy. They finally got what they wanted. You see, they couldn't find him. They didn't know where to find him. They were looking for him, trying to find him, and couldn't. So
Mm.
when Judas, remember, when we looked at I think it was when we looked in lesson four, the lesson before this, is that Judas is going to leave right after the anointing of Jesus by Mary and that in the house,
Mm-hmm.
leave that place and go straight to the high priest. The high
Correct.
priests are trying, their problem was solved when the offer of Judas came to betray Jesus. Finally we get somebody. Now we can go and do it. But now notice something. How desperate Judas is. Judas, from that point on, is looking for an opportune time to betray Jesus. When is the best time to do it? So when he is back with them and they're eating, and Jesus says to them, one of you will betray me.
Mm.
And the question is, all of the disciples were shocked. Lord, is it I?
Mm-hmm.
Well, um, the person who's going to dip with me in this plate, with this cup, that's the person. And what has always struck me is, Judas, you're caught red-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Why you continue with it?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if a person comes and says, "Look here, I know what you're up to, I know what you're up to. It's obvious." I would say, well, all right, let me lay off for a while. Judas continued. All right. So now here is what we're going to have as we follow this plot and the scheme up to the crucifixion. Um, it's going to become very interesting, very significant for us to look at the turn of events as they unfold. All right. So now let's jump now to Mark chapter 14, verse 10 again. Mark chapter 14 and go back to Mark 14. As I said, we're going to be flipping through the
Neil,
different gospels.
can I make a quick
So,
comment?
yeah, yes, ma'am. Please.
Uh, you know what I find striking is the Passover, the festivals, the feasts. They knew the significance of them and what it meant to the people, and not to be able to refute Jesus and accept Jesus from whom God had sent him. Not only were they disobeying or being selfish, they were in radical hatred towards God. Um, because the purpose of the feast were to bring you closer back in relationship with God because of your past sins. Yet they had such evil hearts that they would commit it. So here it is. You remember when they kept challenging Jesus? Is it lawful for you to heal on the Sabbath day? Yet
Mm-hmm.
they would take the Passover, the opportunity to kill Jesus, and forget that the Passover represented their freedom from Egypt. That
Mm-hmm.
just blows my mind.
But you see, Mike, they what that shows, is that these two things, the priesthood, way from the divided kingdom, had become so corrupt
Mm-hmm.
that it lost all sense of moral authority.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because the priests, okay, in Jeremiah's time, what did Jeremiah say? That the priests prophesy falsely, the
Yeah.
prophets prophesy falsely, and my people seem to love it so. But the priests, they had corrupted. Okay, let me give you a classic example of how corrupt the priesthood had become. And I find this thing very, very humorous and comical. It's in Ezekiel.
Mm-hmm.
The priests are in the temple offering sacrifice to idols.
Right. Right. Right.
All right. So they turn off the light and they're in the darkness. And what does the Almighty God say to Ezekiel? And I find it, to me, this is comical. Um, God says, "Come here, Ezekiel, let me show you something. I want to show you
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Look at those. They think they can hide from me now, but look at them offering sacrifice to idols. Watch them. Look there. Is it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the point I'm making is that the priesthood had lost its sense of moral authority. In fact, historians tell us that most of the priests were overweight, they were obese. You know why? Because they were exploiting the people and eating up all of this meat and thing. And not only that, the minor prophets condemned the priesthood.
Yeah.
Why? Because they had become corrupt. So it is okay. They're the priests. Good. They're the leaders of the nation. And you would think that during the Passover, they would want to, as you said, be thinking about the meaning of the Passover, the significance of the Passover in terms of their redemption and all of that from Egypt and all that. That is not in their mind. What is in their mind is a nationalistic idea that, look here, we want to get rid of Roman rule, and this man is not helping us. So we are going to have to kill him because he's getting too popular. He is performing too many signs and miracles. But what were those signs to what were those signs designed to establish? That Jesus is the promised Messiah.
That's right.
But they can't afford that because their popularity is going to go away. It will diminish, and it was diminishing with how the crowds were reacting to Jesus.
Right.
So okay. Now look at the turn of events here now, and it's sometimes we're going to be maybe like have to go over what we said, but not necessarily true. In Judas's action, Mark 14:10. But
Mm-hmm.
no, that's then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad. and promised to give him money. So here is what is unfolding now. Judas, as we have said, leaves the company of the 12. But here is something. What do we know about this so-called Sanhedrin council meeting? What do we know about it?
Well, one, this one was in private.
Ah,
This was in private because we know all of them, all the Pharisees weren't in agreement. Two, he had to know of their hatred for Jesus,
mhm.
and he knew how to bribe or ask them for a bribe, and they were glad. So they had no way of getting to Jesus except we we as a people betray Jesus. And I'm just, my thoughts are running down. Do we betray Jesus today? Uh, but man,
Yeah. But you see, okay, okay, um, one of the things that, all right, well, okay, we are very hard on Judas, and perhaps we have a right to.
mhm.
But my question has always been: is Peter any more righteous in denying Jesus Christ than Judas in betraying him? Because we are very harsh on Judas,
Well, I,
but
I, I
we
believe,
seem to go light on Peter, and we do.
and I believe that all the disciples, except John, who stayed close to the mother of Jesus, they all betrayed him. Uh, the ones walking on the road,
Okay.
So it's the failure. I mean, the apostles and disciples represent the failure and the fear of man and the lack of understanding overall. And Jesus still worked with them. I mean, how many times we see in the Word of God, He says, "How long, ye a little faith? How long I got to be with y'all? How
Mhm.
I mean, y'all say that in instructors. How long would it take y'all to learn this information? What's wrong with you?
How
You
long
know,
am I going to wait for my essay?
yeah. Uh,
All right.
and, and so I think that uh, I'm very careful because they all, in one form or fashion, denied Jesus. And when I look at the Synoptic Gospels and you look at the end, even at the Great Commission, the first, well, the true Great Commission, the second one is the big one in Matthew 28.
Mm.
They are in fear. They're still in amazement. And Jesus and Jesus like, let me cut to the mustard here. All power is given unto me. You, Thomas is doubting. I didn't prove that wrong. God has raised me. I don't have time to deal with your fickle unbeliefs. Matthew, Mark, each of the synoptic gospels reveal a different fear that they had. Some were fearful of being persecuted because they were with Jesus. Some were being fearful because they were not understanding. Um, there's a list of it. But Jesus said, look, all power is given unto me, whether it be in heaven and earth. Therefore, y'all go and teach all nations.
You see, the answer is did not um, forgive himself. And that's his
Right.
strategy. Because Judas has not lost eternity because he betrayed Jesus,
No.
because of what he did afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But here is something now. When we're coming back to Judas, Judas, you made a point. Judas would have known how the Jews felt, the
Mm-hmm.
Sanhedrin, the chief priests felt.
Mm-hmm.
He would have known that. Is it that he was in collusion long ago with them? Not only that, if they're meeting in secret, how did Judas know where to find them?
Right.
If not, that Judas was in collusion with them. All right. You see, so Judas um goes and finds them. All right. That's in Mark, that is in Mark 4:14-10.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, he asked and offered and discussed how he would betray Jesus. Now look at his deliberate actions. Look at Matthew 26 again and verse 15. And then I'll get Luke 22 and verse 6.
All right.
And
15.
the spotlight now is on Judas. 25 verse 15.
26 verse 26. Then one of the
Yeah,
12 named
26
Judas
verse 15. Yeah, sorry.
Iscariot went to the chief priest and said, "What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?" And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus.
All right. Now, Luke 22 and verse number 6. All right. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him to them. Notice now, in the absence of a crowd. Judas is a part of all of this.
Mhm.
Judas says, you cannot capture him when the crowd is with him. Why? Because he's a crowd favorite.
Mhm.
You have to capture him in private when he's alone. The chief priest, you see, notice now, what I want us to see here is that Judas knows how they think. He knows where to find them. And Judas is saying, I will tell you when is the best time to capture him. Don't do it in the crowd. So clearly, Judas is not only offering, how much you going to pay me? But Judas is discussing with the Sanhedrin the best time to capture him.
Mhm.
This is Judas, one of the 12.
Mhm.
And what we're told in Mark 4:11 and Luke 22:5 is that the council was thrilled. They are
All right.
now able to get what they want.
I got a question for you.
Accomplice.
Your internet must be moving slow. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
I got a question for you.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Do you remember when Saul was anointed
Yes, man, I'm
king?
hearing you.
Remember when Saul was anointed king and he had
Okay.
12, and some of
Hmm.
those that didn't believe in him went to go make a deal with the enemy, and they said, "Lest you cut out your right eye and pledge to me." then we'll go against some.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that kind of an illustration as Judas giving out his dominant eye, his eye of faith, toward the Sanhedrin instead of towards Jesus to build an alliance.
Yeah.
It cost
You
him
see, but
much more. Go ahead. I'm just putting a thought to it.
no. Yeah. Okay. This is how. Yes, I can see the almost a similarity. But you see, um, with Judas, what is um there is that Judas, because while the case with the anointing in Kings is almost like a one-off, what it shows in Judas is Judas now um not only saying to the Sanhedrin, I can give him to you. But don't let us get lost on the fact that Judas was seeking every opportunity.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like the constant focus, because see, with the Saul thing, it's just a one-off thing, right? But no, can you imagine Judas alone in his house,
Well, doesn't
plotting
it?
and planning?
But doesn't it say
How
Satan entered into him? Matthew's account says that Satan
yes.
entered into Judas. Said and so he took on a dual purpose: the purpose to betray Jesus, but really he was really serving the devil. Because Matthew
But you
26
see,
says that.
yes, it says that the devil entered into Satan entered into Judas's heart. Yes. But don't get lost on the fact that the devil is working with Judas because Judas revealed himself as to who he was
Right.
from the very beginning. And this is why we went over that anointing. He, why don't you give this thing to the poor? Well, Judas, you're not interested in the poor.
Mm-hmm.
You are greedy. It's
Mm.
your greed. He said that. I think one of the synoptic writers says he said that because he had the bag, he was the treasurer.
Yeah.
He was he was what? The secretary of the treasury.
Mm-hmm.
you know, so Judas already had insincere motives, and up to the very end, he could not let it go, and that is why he's lost. At least one of the reasons he's lost. All right. So um look, so Judas, yes, the devil entered him into him. But let me put it this way. The devil is working with Judas because he knew who Judas was. All right. So here are the things with Judas. Number one, um, he uh, is a part of a deliberate scheme himself to get rid of Jesus. Now, the second point is look at Matthew 26:56. Matthew 26:56.
2656. But all
Mm-hmm.
this, let me go back, right?
Yeah, Matthew 26:56.
But all this has taken place to fulfill the scriptures of the prophets. Then all the disciples left him and fled.
All right. In fact, to sort of get the, as you're right, um, this is when they're now capturing Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, they ran away and left. Matthew is the only one who includes Jesus' statement here when when Jesus says, verse 55, and Jesus said, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not see me. I wonder if you see something here. Jesus says, you really weren't looking for me.
No.
Because if you were looking for me, you'd have known that I was in the temple teaching. You see, Jesus says, if you really wanted to find me, you could have found me. I was in the temple all the time. But I'm saying Matthew is the only one who includes this statement. What does that say about Judas then? Judas never knew that Jesus was in the temple. So he was never with the 12 all this time to know that he was in the temple. You
Judas,
see what I'm
Judas,
saying?
Judas
So, so,
feared
so
the
here's
crowd too.
another.
Judas feared. He feared the crowd
Yes.
too.
And that is why he was saying to them, if you're going to capture him, you have to capture him when he is alone, in secret. All right. When it says that the disciples left him and fled, well, anyway, we'll come to it later on because we're gonna see now. So we're seeing the deliberate plot to capture him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another important stage that is leading to um, the crucifixion and the death of Christ is the story, well, the event of what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane is another important road or journey to the cross. All right. And again, all of the Gospels writers record them. But now, so Matthew um, 26, verse 26 to 40, it's there, but I won't read all of that because it's rather long. Um, we can read it because it's long, but I mean, you know,
Yeah, go ahead. We
in
know what it
fact,
says. Do you hit your highlights? Go ahead.
a while. I'll come back to that. So
No, go ahead.
it's in
I know
Matthew
you.
26, 26 to 40,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we have verse 36 to 46. In fact, um, let us look at verse 36 to 46 of Matthew. And let's just summarize this aspect, but I just want to make sure that it's here. I'll give you the passages and then
Mm-hmm.
we will just summarize them. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is in Matthew 26 from verse 36 to 46. It's in Mark 14, verse 26 and verses 32 to 42. It's in Luke um, 22, verse 39 to 46. And it is in John 18, 1 to 12. Now, um, I want us to look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane because this is crucial. And so let's look at Luke's account in Luke 22. All right. And there's a reason why I want to look at Luke instead of everybody's, because you know, I think Luke is
Yeah,
will serve our
Lucas,
purpose here.
he's on point. Luke, he's
Yeah. All
detailed
right.
enough. Are you ready?
Now,
39 through 46.
yes. So it's Luke 22, verse 39. Right. Yeah.
And he came out and proceeded as was his custom to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed him. And when he arrived at the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter into temptation." And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and began to pray, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but your will be done." Now an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him, and being in agony, he was praying very fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down upon the ground. When he had rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping from sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you might not enter into temptation." All right.
All right. Okay. Now, here are some important things here now in this scene. The Mount of Olives is also central. So Luke says, as Jesus normally does, he goes to the Mount of Olives. And in the Mount of Olives, there's a level place, the Garden of Gethsemane. And when he comes there, he says to the disciples, pray that you don't enter into temptation. So he moves away from them and he goes to pray. Here are
Mhm.
some points. Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Right here in this scene, we see the humanity of Jesus more than anything else. Luke is saying here, all the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, here is the suffering servant. Okay, here is the Isaiah 53 man. Okay, now, first point, there is right in that statement, uh, Jesus praying and saying to the Father, if you are willing, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Right here, what we see is a clash of wills.
Mhm.
Here is Jesus has a will, the Father has a will, and they are coming head on with each other. So Jesus prays, Father, I know I have to go through this. I know that I need to do this, and I have to do this. But if there is another way, let me do it another way. All right? There was no other way. So you have the clash of Jesus's will. Jesus wanted something, the Father wanted to accomplish something as well. So right here in the statement, there is the clash of wills. If there's another way that we can redeem man, let me do it another way. No, Jesus, you have to go through it. All right, so that is one. What it also says to us is that the will of God has to be done. The will of God takes precedence over my will. Jesus, being the Son of God, being the Word of God, that is being the Word rather, was also subject to the will of God. I am not come to do my own will, but the will of Him who sent me. Um, okay, Jesus would say, well, the Hebrew writer would say in Hebrews chapter uh 5, I
Five,
think,
5, 8.
verse 8, 5, 8, and
Yeah.
9.
Though he were a son, he
No, let's
suffered
look at that
things that he
passage for a little
suffered.
while. Let's read that passage for a little while. And I want to point out something
Mm.
that I think sometimes we don't look at.
Yes, there's a lot in that one right there.
Yeah. All right. Because we're coming back to the Garden of Gethsemane issue. Hebrews chapter 10, 8 to 9. No, Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8 to
Hebrews
9.
5. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Hebrews 5, 8 to 9. All right.
You all
I have it.
right? Go ahead.
Um, okay. And being, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Sorry. Here is the point. Jesus had to learn obedience.
Yeah. I I know you go. I know you're gonna get hung on that word right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it would suggest to me that obedience was not automatic for Jesus.
no.
Obedience was not a natural thing for Jesus. That he had to learn obedience, and the Hebrew writer is making reference to Hebrews to the Garden of Gethsemane. He had to learn to obey God through what he suffered, not just there at the Garden of Gethsemane, but throughout his life. All
Right.
right,
And
now,
and
mhm,
and he had to learn to obedience through. He had to learn obedience through suffering, but he didn't have to learn obedience because he's the God of order. He created
yes,
everything, but he never physically suffered, and this is why he's made like us, so we can understand, and God Himself understands. So there's a lot of scriptures that interact with that, and I heard one preacher say it's astonishing to say that Jesus didn't know something; he had to learn it. Um,
no,
but,
but we
but
see
I, I,
go on.
I want to look at that word in the original text. What learned is,
Mm-hmm.
um, um,
All right.
because he chose to suffer. He chose. That's why he said in the garden, Father, if it be thy will, take this cup of suffering from me, but not my will, thy will be done. So at the height of
All
his
right.
suffering, he humbled himself. He emptied himself um, to the will of the Father. That's why you say clash of wills.
Mm-hmm. But you see, here is the point now. One of the things that we must not forget is that Jesus was not a fake. What do I mean by that? What Jesus experienced, good, what
Yeah,
Jesus experienced, he did experience, because don't let us not forget that Jesus was human,
that's right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was human. And that is why it says he can identify with us. Um, you know, so we are, he can identify with us because he was made like unto his brethren. All
Right.
right. Um, my whole point is that here we have another aspect to this thing. Jesus is being the son of, being the word, being the living word,
Mm-hmm.
being the son of God. If the son of God had to obey God, why do we think that we can be pleasing to God without obeying him? Because even in his son, God expected obedience
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
the living word. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So my whole point is the Garden of Gethsemane incident is an important feature because it shows the humanity of Jesus. All right. Now, not only that, there is something else about this Garden of Gethsemane instance. When it says, uh, we're told that angels came to strengthen him,
Right.
and his agony was so intense that God the Father had to send angels to strengthen him
Mm-hmm.
because he needed it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why I want I like Luke. Luke is a doctor, all right, and Luke is very detailed. We well the Christian tradition, religious tradition, often makes the point wrongly, incorrectly, that Jesus' perspiration was blood. It
No,
wasn't.
it's like drops. He
It was
uses the
like
metaphor.
drops of blood.
Yeah,
And
he
what?
uses the metaphor.
No, the
Hey,
simile.
yeah, yeah, simile. Right, like,
Yeah,
yeah, because metaphors
yeah,
don't
right.
use it. And that's important because every drop of blood God counts for. And God would not have him drop blood on the account for mankind without him going to the crucifixion. That until he enters into that process, the blood of Christ was not spilled.
Right.
Um,
And
and,
go on.
and I asked the question because when we get into the crucifixion, the scourging, and if
Hmm.
you just and you look at the scourging, they took that cloth and they dipped it in blood, animal's blood, and they dipped it in debris, glass and rocks and stones.
Yeah.
That's what they scourged with, and his flesh was ripped
Hmm.
from his body. So therefore, he was bleeding.
Yeah.
You know, so every drop of blood uh, is important to God because what life is in the blood.
Yes. And that is why when it says that Jesus shed his blood, it means that Jesus poured out his life because the life is in the blood.
That's right.
All right. So here's another thing. What Luke is trying to paint for us is the intensity of the sufferings of Christ.
That's
So
right.
much so that his sweat was so heavy that it was just as heavy as blood, it's just as thick as blood. But you know, you made a point, and this is another point I want to comment on in terms of the um the Garden of Gethsemane here, is that as much as Jesus was going through intense suffering,
Mm-hmm.
that could not have redeemed us.
No,
That did not redeem us.
no.
It Jesus had to, and the scourging and the beating and the bleeding, is, but Jesus had to pour out his life. And that is where our redemption is, in Jesus giving his life, giving his blood for our salvation. So now Jesus is praying. Well, Matthew records that he asked 3 times, or
Mm-hmm.
he kept asking, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. He comes back and he sees his disciples sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says to them, you couldn't even watch with me for an hour?
Mm-hmm. I asked y'all to pray for yourselves, and
It,
y'all couldn't even
it,
watch.
yeah, yeah. You know, and Jesus is saying, all I was asking you for is an hour, 1 hour, and you couldn't give me 1 hour. It shows here Jesus' disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we call it the worship hour.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because our worship is an hour,
Yeah.
and there are some members who think it hard to give Jesus just 1 hour.
Yeah.
Jesus is saying to them, look here, you couldn't give me an hour? Look how many hours are there in the day that I give you. And you couldn't give me 1 hour?
Not one.
And in fact, what the question comes and says is this: given the sacrifice and the sufferings of Jesus, nothing that God asks us to do for our own salvation should be difficult to do.
No.
Nothing. Nothing should be difficult because he's not asking us for much.
Mm-mm.
All right. The other point from the Garden of Gethsemane here is that Jesus comes and says, you know what? It is enough. What Jesus is saying, you have done as much as you could. There's nothing else that you can do now. I am going now to be crucified. You came with me to this point, but no, there's nothing more to do for you to do. Because my hour is here. All right. So the Garden of Gethsemane, we can read the ones in Mark and read the ones in Matthew and all that. But in terms of looking at it in its total situation, um, we we see that the Garden of Gethsemane is an important um, milepost, if you wish, as he is journeying towards Calvary.
Right.
All right. Now, here is something else. There is a parallel between the Passover celebration, celebrating deliverance, and Jesus, the Lamb of God, that is to be slain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
At the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane, um, Jesus describes his disciples. Um, all right. Look at verse in Matthew now. Look at verse um chapter 26. Look at verse 39.
Verse
26 and
39.
verse 39.
Okay. And then it says, and he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples, and he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, So you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keeping
All right.
watch,
That's what.
okay,
Go on, go on. Go on.
keeping watching, keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He
All
went
right.
away. He went away again the
I can
second
yeah,
time.
hold there. What Jesus is saying, you really want to. I know you want to, but your spirit is willing. But I mean,
That's
it
right.
has been a long day and you're tired.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unfortunate that you couldn't spend this time to give me the support that I needed.
Mm.
All right. And now here, look at I think Mark 14:40. I think is this is what I want. Mark 14:40.
All right, you ready? 40.
Yeah.
Uh, and again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time. He said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? Isn't it enough? The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed in the hands of sinners. Get up.
All right. No, here is what Jesus says. When Jesus asked them the question, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Mark tells us that they couldn't answer him. They didn't know how to answer him. Why? Because they are now reflecting on the fact that, look here, we failed. They couldn't answer. They didn't know what to say to him.
Hmm.
Why? Because they just um okay, the idea that they couldn't answer him, um it's like, oh my, we have failed. What did we not do that we should have done? All right, now let me just read Luke's account. um and Luke 22:45. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, Why are you sleeping? Now, notice something here. Sermon topic: Why are you sleeping? Why are you sleeping on the job? Why are you inactive? Why? Because you see, um, Matthew says, Jesus asked, Are you still sleeping? Luke says, Jesus asked, Why are you sleeping?
Hmm. Hmm.
In other words, any way you take it is a condemnation,
That's right.
Why are you at this point?
You sleep at the
You
wheel.
need to be, say it again.
You're sleeping at the wheel.
Yeah, you're
you're
sleeping at the wheel.
sleeping at the wheel.
And what Jesus is saying to them, look here. Then he says, rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation. You need to be alert. You need to be conscious. Why are you sleeping? This is not the time to sleep. All right. So this is very, very important in terms of um, an important stage in the development um, of Jesus's journey to Jerusalem. All right, let us take a break here now, and when we come back, we will look at the Last Supper. All right,
All right,
it's now by my time
we're still,
about 3:15.
all right, we're still in lecture. We're still in lecture. We're still in the same lecture, right?
Still lecture 15.
Okay.
Yes, yes, we're on.
Yep.
All right. As we continue, we're going to look at the Last Supper. All right. And in this case, the Last Supper is Matthew 26, verse 20 to 35, Mark 14, 17 to 31, Luke 22, 14 to 38. And of course, it is also recorded in John chapter 13. All right. So now let's look at Mark's account. All right. Let's spend our time in Mark's account. That's Mark chapter 14.
14.
Yeah, Mark chapter
Where
14.
you, where you
All
want me to
right.
start at?
Mhm. Um, verse 7. Let me see. Let's start. In fact, before that, no, let's start at verse 22. Verse 22 to verse 31.
Because this is the Lord's Supper, right?
Yes, right.
While they were eating, he took some bread and he offered a blessing. He broke it and he gave it to them and he said, take it. This is my body. And when he had broken a cup, and when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I say unto you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God. After singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, You all fall away, you will all fall away, because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. But Peter said unto him, Even though all may fall away, yet I will not. And Jesus said unto him, Truly I say to you, that this is very night before a rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times. Peter kept saying insistently, Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And they all were saying the same thing also.
All right. Okay.
Awesome.
Poor Peter. All right. Now, in John's account, the Last Supper, there is the washing of the disciples' feet. Uh, all right. Now, so in Matthew chapter 26, where the
Mm-hmm.
other Matthew's account is to be found,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is the consideration of the blessing of the bread. Um,
Mm-hmm.
all right. And in Luke's account, Luke's give thanks for both bread and cup. All right. Now, in his uh reading, in this reading, let's take out some things out of the mix. The one cup doctrine falls on its face.
Hold on. I got to pause.
There are a lot of doctrinal errors that must be addressed, just in passing, although we're not dealing with it. No, that's for a different class. But the one cup people, or one cup brethren, um, have the idea that you must only drink out of one cup. Um, and again, this instance where Jesus says, "Drink ye all of it," um, what is being emphasized here is the contents of the cup and not the literal cup itself. That's one. The Roman Catholics talk about a doctrine that they call transubstantiation, and that is, when the Eucharist is being served and the and it is in the Anglican Church as well, Episcopalian Church as well. They believe that it becomes the literal body and blood of Christ. Now, at what moment does it become the literal body and blood of Christ? When that bell is shaken, and the priest lifts up the elements, it becomes the literal body and blood of Christ. But of course, that the Bible doesn't teach. But anyway, what Jesus is saying here is that he's instituting the Lord's Supper. And while Mark has that sort of a very brief view, if we go to Matthew chapter 26, we're going to see um, how Jesus actually is instituting the Lord's Supper. So he says, the word testament is the word will or the word agreement. And in all of the three accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that statement is for many. This is the blood of the New Testament, for shed for many. All right. And so what the phrase is suggesting is that Jesus is saying, I am pouring out, I'm shedding my blood. The pouring out and the shedding of blood is an indication that Jesus is going to experience a violent death, and that this violent death is going to be sacrificial. When Jesus makes the statement, this is, he says in verse number 28, Matthew 26 and verse 28, where he
This is my
says,
blood. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sin.
right, Matthew is the only synoptic writer that includes the words for the remission of sins. All right. So Mark, Luke just says, "This is my body, this is my blood, which is shed for many." But Matthew says, "For many, for the remission of sins." Okay. Now, in Luke's account, Luke tells of first taking of the cup. So the cup is taken, then the breaking of the bread, and then the cup again. So if you look at Luke 22 and verse 17, um, 22 and verse 17, it says,
I got it.
mhm,
And when he had taken the cup and given thanks, he said, "Take this and share it among yourselves. For I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine from now on until the kingdom of God comes. And when he had taken
All right.
some, and
Mhm.
given thanks.
Mhm. Right. So, and then of course in verse 19, he takes the cup, he takes the bread, and then in verse 20, likewise, he takes the cup. All right. So the cup of verse 17 is not the communion cup. All right. It's not the communion cup of verse 20, but it is the last of the four cups passed during the Passover. All right. So it is not the communion cup. All right. Now, in Mark chapter 14 and verse 27, Jesus tells of his death and gives his farewell address. Um, and of course, they are offended because we won't run away. We won't run away. We will be with you and all of that. But moments after this, they're going to be left sleeping when he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. All right. Now, Mark in chapter 14 and verse 27 suggests and highlights Peter's vehemence. All right. Um, Showing Peter is adamant that I will never forsake you. I will never let you down. All right. So in verse number 27 of Mark 14,
And Jesus said unto them, you will
um,
all fall away, because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Mm.
verse 28. Look at verse 28.
It says, but after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee.
Okay, verse 29, I mean.
Hello?
Sorry.
Who's at the door? All right. Verse 29. But Peter said unto him, even though all may fall away, yet I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I say unto you, that this very night before a rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times. But Peter kept saying insistently, even if I had to die with you, I will not deny you. And they all were saying the same thing also.
All right. So they are very adamant, insistent that they're not going to be doing that. All right. No. Um, so he's speaking. So he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane after this, and he's praying and he's doing all of that. All right. So we have that account. I just give you them. Matthew 26, verse 47 to verse 56. We have Mark 14, verse 43 to 52. We have Luke 22, from 47 to 53, and John 18 rather, from verses 2 to 13. All right. Now, here's what happens now. Um, After he spoke to his disciples in Gethsemane and all of that, a multitude arrives. The crowd comes. There is also a murderous mob. All right. Look at Luke 22, verse 47. All right, Luke 22 and verse 47.
22:47.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're back in the Garden of Gethsemane now, just as he talked about you couldn't watch with me a couple hours. Then now the mob comes. Verse 47 of Luke 22.
Verse 1 of Luke 22 or verse 47.
Luke, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now when the centurion saw what was happening, he began praising God. No, you talk. Oh, I'm sorry. I was in 23.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong one. All right. And while he was still speaking, behold, a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was preceding them. And he approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Hmm.
All right.
When those, when
No,
those go ahead.
no, it's just that I want to say that you say that he preceded the 12. He preceded the crowd, right?
Yeah,
And that's the Nasby.
he led them. He led the
Right. So
Pharisees.
the ESV says he was leading them.
Mm-hmm,
Preceded
mm-hmm.
them sounds very nice. All
Right.
right. So the ESV captures the fact that he was leading the mob. And then so Jesus says to him, are you going to betray me with a kiss?
Mm.
Judas, for goodness sake, he caught you red-handed. One of you at this table
Betray me.
will betray me. Try something else now. Um, you are going to betray me with a kiss, Judas, and Judas kisses him. I just anyway, that's just fascinating to me. All right. So Jesus is captured, he is taken away by the mob. All right. Now, what we're going to see here in the trial of Jesus is that the trial is going to take on a number of stages. Okay. Now, the record of the trial of the trial in Jesus' conviction it's going to be found in Matthew 26, verse 57 to 68, Mark 14, 53 to 66, Luke 22, 54 to 65, and John 18, 12 to 24. I'm going to do something unusual because while we're not doing the the John, I want to look at John's account. All right. Uh, all right. I want to leave the others. I want to look at John's account. So we're going to look at John's account, John chapter 12, and um, we're going to look at John 18.
Yeah, I'm about to say because
John
John chapter
18,
12.
verse 12. No, it's John 18. John 18, verse 12 to 24.
Yeah, I'm about to say. I mean, you looking at that.
Yeah. All right. So we don't want to read it. Let's hold on to there for a little while. All right. So there are stages in the trials of Jesus. What's the stage? He was tried before Annas. That is John 18:13. Right? So in John
Mm-hmm.
18:13, um,
Annas first, who was the
yes, right?
father-in-law, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas.
Mm-hmm. So you see the plotting, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, as we looked at earlier. Jesus rides into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, found the village at Bethany, and now he is no wait, I'm mixing this up. Sorry, I'm mixing this up. Um, okay, let me go back just a minute. All right. No, let me go back now. After the supper, Judas betrays him. Yeah, right. Jesus and his disciples in comes down the Kidron Valley, and to Gethsemane, from Gethsemane to and he is at the foot of Mount Olives now, and it is here that he is arrested. Now, let me go back up to those passages, and I think I want to go to verses 12 to 24. But let us look now at some of the things here. Look, starting now. In
You
fact,
want to
you know
start
what?
verse 1?
Um, exactly. Let's start at verse 1.
Okay. When Jesus spoke to these words, he went forth with his disciples over to the ravine of Kidron, where there was a garden in which he entered with his disciples. Now Judas also was betraying him, knew the place, for Jesus had often met there with his disciples. Judas then, having received the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So Jesus, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said unto them, "I am he." And Judas also, who was betraying him, was standing with them. So when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Therefore he again asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these go their way, to fulfill the word which was spoke. Of those whom you have given me, I've lost not one."
All right,
Simon
stop there,
Peter.
stop there,
Mhm.
stop there for a while. Yeah, all right. Now let's look at just this, right? What John is emphasizing here is even at this point, the divinity of Christ. We know from Mark's account that when Jesus says, "Who are you seeking?" that Judas is going to come and kiss him. All right. From John's account, we know that it is in the night because they're coming with torches and lamps. All right. Now, so what we have here in this instance is that Jesus is taken now. Um, Annas is going. He's going to be interviewed first by the Annas, who was the high priest before Caiaphas, and there is going to be an informal tribunal. And the high priest himself, in this case Caiaphas, is going to be trying Jesus. Okay, now what we know from John's account is that Jesus, Peter, is going to strike the ear of Malchus, the Roman centurion. Now, if we look at the interview now between um, Caiaphas and Annas with Jesus. Look now at verses 12 through to verse 14.
So the Roman cohort And the commander and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him and led him to Annas. First, he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was expedient for one man to die on the behalf of the people.
All right. So here's what we have now. There is an informal um, discussion here. All right. Um, I think we need to go back to Matthew. All right. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26. John, why was it John filled in some details that the others didn't? The question, John, which appears in John, who are you looking for? Um, all of those things. All right. Now look at Matthew 26, which I think this is going to be so interesting um, for me. All
You,
right.
you, you want to start at
Now,
verse 57?
um, one,
Th-
yes,
Those,
verse
those
57.
who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, when the scribes and the elders were gathered together. But Peter was following him at a distance, far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus, so that he might put him to death. They did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, two came forward and said, "This man stated, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said to him, "Do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you?" But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest said to him, "I adjure you are by the living God, that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said unto him, "You have said it to yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and
All right.
others him. Hmm.
What verse are you?
Verse 68, and he said, "Prophesy
All
to
right.
us, Christ, who is the one who hit you?" Hmm.
Okay. Now, here is the here is the situation at hand. Um, this was the most illegal, illegal um, trial that you could ever find. All right. Now,
Yeah.
what we see in the trial of Jesus here, and when we look at the synoptics, is that Jesus was tried under two laws. He was tried under the Jewish law, and he was also tried under the Roman law. Okay? When he was tried under the Roman law, the Roman officials found, says of him, "We find no fault with this man."
Hmm.
All right? There, he's innocent. Okay. So here is what we're going to notice in the trial is the fact that this, as I said, this is the greatest miscarriage of justice you could ever find. All right. Um, there are some issues that we need to make plain and get clear in our minds as we look at this, issue here. Okay. All right. No.
Eddie, move back over. You're moving. Just keep sliding to the other way.
One of those issues is okay. I'm here now.
Yeah, you keep moving
Okay.
to the left.
Let me. Yeah. Okay. Um. Am I gone out of the picture?
No, you're like you
Let me
was
see
half
something
in and
going on
half
here.
out for a second. You're good. You see? Do you see me? See, this is what you got. Look
Okay.
look at me in the picture. See me? That's you. You need to be here,
Yeah.
like here.
So
You're not.
are
You
you
need to be.
pause the recording for a while? Let us work this out. How you?
All right.
All right. What I'm saying here is that Jesus is tried under two laws: the Roman law and
Mhm.
the uh, Jewish
Jewish
law.
law,
Now,
and both of them were
they
unjust.
and both of them uh, were partial, right? There, in fact, half of the laws were observed, but they were the Roman officials were more honest in their judgment than the Jews. Now, here's some things that we need to ask. Well, were the charges credible?
No,
All right. No, they weren't. Um, was the process according to law? No.
no.
And we're going to look at some of this. All right. Um, the Sanhedrin. Here is the point. The Sanhedrin had judicial authority to
Mhm.
educate the internal business of the Jews, right? They had no business pronouncing the death sentence.
Mm.
That was reserved for the Roman officials. They could deal with their internal system. So that is why I think when they went to Pilate or Herod, it says, "You have a law, you go deal with that." All right.
Mhm.
Now, um, the trial is going to demand that certain standards are met, which they are going to ignore. Okay. Um, the grounds and the facts upon which the charges were laid against Jesus, we will find out that they're going to change their judgment a number of times. In fact, they're going to change the indictment.
Mhm.
Okay. Not only that, Roman uh, law suggested that they, as I said earlier, that they cannot pronounce the death sentence.
Right.
Now, what were the charges against Jesus? The charges against Jesus was one, sedition.
Mm.
The second charge that they trumped up was blasphemy.
Mhm.
All right. This the Sanhedrin council could deal with. All right. Now, here is the idea. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 a.m. in the morning, rather,
Mhm.
from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. That is 8 hours. Jesus is going to undergo 6 trials
6 trials in 8 hours.
in 8 hours. 3 from Roman law, under Roman law, and 3 from Jewish law. All right. Here is the point. The Roman law acquitted him. I find no fault with this man. I am innocent. Pilate says, I'm innocent of the blood of this innocent man. But he was condemned under Jewish law. All right. Look at John 18,
So you said there's
verses 12 to 14.
You said there's three trials from the Jews and 3 trials from Rome.
Yeah. All right. Look at John 18, 12 to 14.
You said 12 of what now?
John 18, 12 to 14.
All right. So the Roman cohort and the commander and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him and led him to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of the people. Simon Peter also following Jesus, and so was another disciple. Now the disciple was known that disciple was known to the high priest and entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. But Peter was standing at the door outside. So the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. Then the slave girl who kept
All
the
right,
door.
stop there. Stop there. Hold a minute there. Hold a minute. You see, in the first trial, Annas, that's the first Jewish trial, where Annas is saying one man should die for the nation. Peter, I will never run away. Peter is standing at the door. All right. Now, that is the first trial.
But isn't
The second trial.
Caiaphas the second trial?
This is Annas. This is Annas. Annas is the first trial.
Right.
All right. The first trial. And what is the trial? What is the crime that is going to be? He is blaspheming. Right? Now, look at the second trial. And the second trial is in Matthew 26, verse 57 to 68.
Those who had seized Jesus and led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. But Peter was following him at a distance far from the courtyard of the high priest, and entered and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus, so they might put him to death. They did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later, 2 came forward and said, "This man stated, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days." The high priest stood up and said, do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying
All right.
against
Now,
you?
this second trial is being led charge here? Hmm? What is
Mhm.
the charge here? The charge here is that he is worthy of death because he has committed the crime of blasphemy. You have committed blasphemy, you should be stoned. So he is making himself out to be. Look at verses 64 and 65.
Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard this blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered, he deserves death. They they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said,
Blasphemy.
"Prophesy to us, you Christ."
All right. So that is the second of the three Jewish trials. Now, here is the third one. The strike him in his face, yes. Now, here's the third one. Luke, first of all, Matthew 27, verses 1 to 2, and then Luke chapter 63, Luke 22, verse 63 to 71.
Matthew 27. Now when morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and they led him away and delivered him to Pilate, the governor. What's the next verse?
All right. Now, in the third trial with the Jews, look go over to Luke 22, verse 63 to 71.
Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him and beating him, and they blindfolded him, and they were asking him, saying, "Prophesy, who is the one who hit you?" And they were saying many other things against him, blaspheming. And when
To
it when it was
71.
and when it was day, the council of the elders of the people assembled both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber, saying, "If you are Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." And they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he
You're
said,
breaking
"Yes."
up.
He said, "Are you the Son of God then?" He says, "Yes, I am." Then they said, "What further need do we have of testimony? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth." Mm, mm.
In the third behind closed doors. All right. Now, so of the three they're doing here, um, we see that the crime, sedition, blasphemy. All right. What they have done, bring false witnesses. They bring false witnesses to testify against Jesus. But here is how they are not following Jewish law. If you're going to convict somebody, what do you need? Two or three witnesses, right?
2 or 3 witnesses.
right? But then, the 2 or 3 witnesses are contradicting each other.
And they're supposed to be put to death.
So how can you convict a man, false witness, having a trial behind closed doors, accusing you of something, and he is not able to defend himself?
And
All
they
right. So now
and
here
they were
is
not they
the
were
idea.
they were
Now, when
not
it
supposed,
comes to
Brother Fisher,
all of that,
Brother Fisher. They also didn't have the right to put their hands
they
on him.
were
They also did not have the right to put their hands on him, because the law didn't authorize for you to beat to beat with your hands physically. You were supposed to strike with stripes. You wasn't supposed to be physically attacking someone like that.
you see, I'm not on. I'm not on that. They the trial is not. Jewish law says the trial is not supposed to be held at night. The trial is held at night.
Hmm.
So after that, now what they're going to do, they're going to turn Jesus over to Roman law. Now, Jesus appears before the Roman authorities 3 times. He is before Herod, sent to Pilate, sends him to Herod. Pilate tries him, sends him to Herod. Herod tries him, sends him back to Pilate. Okay, now, so the first trial among the Roman officials was before Pilate, then Herod, and then Pilate again. But notice now, when Pilate says, I'm washing my hands of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm washing my hands of all of this because this man is innocent.
Mm-hmm.
Changed the indictment. No longer is it blasphemy. No longer is it sedition. No, blasphemy. They're now saying, Pilate, you, here is a man that is trying to overthrow the government. But I thought that the conviction was about blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
So they have changed, and Matthew, all of the gospel writers point to what Jesus is being accused of. Find any fault with him. And we see that in all of the accounts, he sends him to Pilate. Now, I think Luke is the person who's going to say, up to that time, Pilate and Herod were not talking to each other.
Right. They became
So
friends
when
after.
they send him there, um, they became friends afterwards. No,
Mm-hmm.
Pilate did not give them a hearing to do with it. You go and fix it. But you know what they did? They blackmailed Pilate. Pilate, your province that the Roman government sent you is in trouble. So if you don't do what we want, we're going to report you to Caesar. That's the extent to which they're going. These Jews who want to get rid of Roman government is now appealing, threatening Pilate to appeal to Caesar to establish stricter Roman rule in Palestine. But I thought you wanted to get rid of the Jews, get rid of Rome out of the Jewish land. But this is the desperate thing So Pilate doesn't give him and them a hearing the time of this. So what do? They switch the crime. And Pilate's verdict is, I find no fault with him. Look at Luke um, 27 and verse 26.
You talking about Luke
Luke
chapter
27 and
23?
verse
Chapter,
26.
chapter 23?
No,
Or you
not
want
Luke,
chapter?
not Luke. Sorry, I'm sorry. Luke 23 and verse 6 and Matthew 27 and verse 6.
Uh,
Um, I will, you
now,
want to
yeah,
take note here?
now Herod was very glad when he saw Jesus, for he had wanted to see him for a long time because he had been hearing about him and was hoping to see some sign performed by him. And he questioned him at that some length, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and the scribes were standing there, accusing him vehemently. And Herod was with his soldiers, after treating him with contempt and mocking him, dressed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him back to Pilate. Now Herod and Pilate became friends with one another that very day. For before they had been enemies with each other. Pilate summoned the chief priests,
Okay, that was what? Luke.
23 verses 6 through 12. And then Pilate is seeking to release Jesus.
Okay, what verse are you reading?
Um, let's go to verse 20. Well, we'll start at verse 18.
What chapter are you reading?
23.
What chapter are you reading?
Luke chapter
Okay,
23.
all right.
Luke chapter 23.
Yeah, you're breaking up sometimes. Yes.
Okay. But they cried out all together, saying, away with this
And you're
man.
at 20.
Yeah, I'm going to start at 18. Away with this man, release us
Okay.
Barabbas. And he had been known to throw into prison and insurrection made in the city for another murder. Pilate, verse 20, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but they kept on calling out, saying, crucify, crucify him. And he said to them the third time, what evil has this man done? I have found in him no guilt demanding death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. But they were insistent with the loud asking voices asking that he be crucified. And their voices began to prevail. And Pilate pronounced sentence that their demand to be granted. And he released the man whom were asking who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, you're breaking up in and out, and I can hardly hear you. Um, but the whole point is when he goes to Herod,
Mm-hmm,
I find no fault in him. When he
mm-hmm.
to Pilate, I'm free from the hand of innocent blood. What do you want to do with this innocent man? Crucify him. Give him the death sentence because he is innocent. That is the irony of the trial. So here is the point. After all of the trials and everything, here is something that I want you to see. Within 24 hours, within one day, Jesus is is arrested, he is condemned, he's sentenced to die, and he's executed in one day. And that suggests that this is really a mockery of a trial. And I'm saying all of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke being the synoptics, and being the synoptics, and John, this was fear trial. All right. So from after he is tried by Pilate and everything, he is taken to Calvary and he is crucified. All right. And I'm saying that we're going to look at the stages of his crucifixion. All right. And that's what I have for this, his trial, his arrest, and his crucifixion. Tomorrow, well, when we do the next lecture, we're going to look at the next class, next session, whatever. We are going to be looking at the stages of the death, well, his death, his resurrection, and how he appears, his appearances to his disciples.
All right. That's good. We're going to do that tomorrow morning.
Any questions, comments?
No, this is a lot of information, and
that's what?
It's a powerful study. It really is a powerful study.
Because see, they break the, yeah.
I mean, and you think about
the Jews.
I don't know. Is it raining down there?
No, it isn't.
It's not raining up here because you keep going in and
but what
out.
I'm saying here is that the Jews, yeah, that's what I know is I keep going in and out as well, and I can't hear you. All right. But the point I'm making here is that the Jews broke all of their national laws. They trumped up the charge. They crucified, sent Jesus to his death simply because they were jealous of him. And in the trial, what you find is how unjust and unfair the trial was. Because they're not supposed to try him in the night, they tried him in the night. They're not supposed to have a hearing in the dark, in closed hearing. They had it. They brought false witnesses who were not agreeing with each other. All right. They took Jesus out of context when he talked about he will tear down the temple and build it in 3 days. He was talking about his death. And the crowd that followed him knew that, but the Jews took him out of context because they wanted to get rid of him. All right. So we will look at his death, his resurrection, and his appearance in the next session.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so very much. Powerful class.
You wanna stop the